New translation of the Bible. We haven't seen it in America yet, coming right out of Great Britain. And it came to New York Harbor. So the Chicago Tribune sent one of their ace reporters to meet that ship coming in with a new version of the Bible. They want the people in Chicago to be the first people in America to get to read the new version of the Bible. That reporter took the revised version of the Bible, took the New Testament, and sent the entire New Testament as a telegraph back to the Chicago Tribune. Chicago Tribune then printed the entire New Testament so people in Chicago could be the first ones to read the new version of the Bible. But the media did that? Yeah. Used to, because see, that was the free market. That's what they responded to. That's where they made their money, was selling papers to those kind of people, which was us. He said the public press lacks moral discrimination, the pulpit's responsible for it. If the church is degenerate and worldly, the pulpit's responsible for it. He says if the world loses its interest in religion, the pulpit's responsible for it. He says if Satan rules in our halls of legislation, the pulpit's responsible for it. He says if our politics become so corrupt, the very foundations of our government are ready to fall away, the pulpit is responsible for it. He said, let us not ignore this fact, my dear brethren, but let us lay it to heart and be thoroughly awake to our responsibility in respect to the morals of this nation. See, that is exactly what America was built on, and we just can't let the world squeeze us into the mold it's trying to right now. It's trying to tell us we don't have a voice. Stay in that little 2-foot square behind the pulpit. Don't get out of that. If you do, the IRS is going to get you. If you do, we're going to, Rick Perry calls 49 states to join Texas in prayer and fasting of all things. And Freedom from Religion Foundation files a lawsuit because a public official is having the audacity to pray and fast. I mean, that's the kind of intimidation that's going on when you try to step out of that box. Well, it's time for us to step out of the box, face the intimidation down, and get this thing back under control. So, again, great stuff ADF is doing to equip pastors to be able to take back some of this ground, because we won't get this thing back if we don't get bold in the pulpit. Now, let me move into another segment, and then we'll take a break here in a little bit. And by the way, if you want to see some of these old sermons I just showed you, we posted a ton of those on the web, so you can read those sermons, see what we used to preach in previous generations. We've got a history of the Black Robe Regiment. You can go to blackroberegiment.wallbuilders.com, and you can find all that information. A ton of information there specifically for pastors and preachers. I want to go back to something that Teddy Roosevelt said earlier. You remember the comment he made? He says, the teachings of the Bible are so interwoven with our civic and social life, it would be possible for us to figure what life would be if these teachings were removed. The civic and social life, I want to focus on that for a minute, how the Bible has shaped that, because specifically I want to show you what the Bible's done in shaping the Constitution. I've kind of alluded to it, but let me get specific. And if I were to say this in most groups today, God had an influence in the Constitution, we would instantly go, no, he did not. It's a godless Constitution. We got all these law professors and all these professors at universities and all these courts. This book right here has become the Bible for the other side. You would not believe how many law reviews cite that as the authority, how many court cases have used that as the authority. Well, you can't have that kind of stuff because we have a godless Constitution. Our professors have told us so. This is a very big deal, and a lot of people buy into this. The reason they do is the way we've taught history in the last 50 years. In the last 50 years, we have specifically done 5 historical malpractices, 5 historical traps that have caused us to think differently about the way we view the past. I'm going to take you through those. I'm going to show you examples of them, because the examples I'll show you are very applicable to the way the courts think, the way that the people you deal with, they think. I'll show you court case examples of how the courts apply these things. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 2:11. I love this passage. We're well aware of his schemes so that we won't be taken advantage of by Satan. The trick is, if you know what the traps are, if you know what the 5 things are, you won't fall into them. I'm a country boy. I'm a cowboy. Ride horses all the time. We put traps out because of all the varmints we have, and there's some pretty bad varmints that we have. We had a lot of rabies carrying stuff, so we trap them. But the problem is if they ever figure out what a trap looks like, you can't catch them anymore. Once they know what a trap looks like, a trap is no longer effective. And that's the deal. We've got 5 historical traps into which people often fall. And once you know what the traps look like, you can avoid the traps. It's a good way to stay away from them. So the 5 traps are called post-structuralism, modernism, academic collectivism, minimalism, and deconstructionism. Let me take you through them quickly and show you how each one affects the way we think. Post-structuralism, that means persons have value not on the basis of who they are individually, but rather on the basis of the groups with which they identify. Now, identification with groups is what's also known as identity politics. That's why in America today, we don't represent citizens. We represent groups. Lobbyists. We have lobbyists we don't have lobbyists for citizens. We got lobbyists for youth or for abortion or for feminists or environmentalists. Everybody's got a group. You have to belong to some kind of group. I was one of the 6 guys appointed in the state of Texas to do our history standards. And we were told in that thing that you have to show the contributions of various groups to the United States. So if you're not part of a group, you didn't contribute anything? Is that what I'm getting at? Well, see, that was the argument. Now, we blew that up and said, no, we're going to show the contributions of individuals, but they wanted everything to be from a group. And so this concept that you have to be broken into a group somehow, that has a lot of power and play. It also separates us from the concept of nationalism, because I don't belong to a nation, I belong to a group. Show you how we used to deal with this. Go back to 1919, at the end of World War I. There's an immigration book. And by the way, of course, in the Great Seal it says e pluribus unum, which is out of many one. What we do now deliberately is e unum pluribus. We say out of one nation, there's a whole bunch of different groups. You're not part of a nation, you're part of a group. Your loyalty is to your group, not to your nation. Now, you go back to immigration times, 1919, into World War I, the beginning of World War II. An immigration naturalization chief did this book on how to become a citizen of the United States. We had an influx of people after World War I. We had an influx of people at the start of World War II. Nazis have been ravaging across Europe several years. Here's what it takes, according to the naturalization chief, to be a citizen of the United States. It says very simply, an American is a man who is greater in his soul than in his class, creed, political party, or the section in which he lives. To be an American, a man must have an American soul and believe in spiritual realities upon which America rests and out of which America was born. Believe in spiritual realities? He continues, he says, America was created to unite mankind by those passions which lift and not by the passions which separate and abase. We came to America to get rid of the things that divide and make sure of the things that unite. And that's an interesting immigration concept, but we say exactly the opposite. Come to America, but stay part of your group. You don't need to be part of the nation. Just, pass the citizenship test and be part of your group. It's a whole different approach. You see, this is also why we do hate crimes, because we're going to decide which groups we're going to, we'll protect transgender and we'll protect gays, but we're not going to protect seniors, we're not going to protect veterans. We won't put those in the group. See, we choose what groups we're going to protect, not what individuals. We're not going to protect individuals. This is post-structuralism. This is how it works. I see it a whole lot of times in what goes on even in courts because of this. Minority influence is a central component of identity politics. You see, if you're all part of a group, then you're not part of the whole, you're a small part of a group, and therefore everything has to be protected for that small group, whatever it is. The phrase you'll find this phrase right now on the website of the U.S. Supreme Court. The primary responsibility of the judiciary is to protect the minority from the majority. We've broken America into groups, the majority and the minority. That's bad news for me, because I am a white male. That's a double majority for me. So I guess I'm not going to find anything in the courts to help me, because courts exist to protect the minority from people like me. Wait a minute. I want to go into court and be able to have the right of habeas corpus or have an attorney represent me. I want to be able to have the right to keep embarrassment. No. That's to protect minorities from people like you. See, and this is why it is so easy to have the dissenter's veto. This is why it is so easy to have someone like Michael Newdow who gets offended over religion to stop the other 99%, because we got to protect the minority from the majority. We're broken into groups. That's post-structuralism. The other thing that I saw in going through a ton of, particularly when we were doing Ten Commandments cases, one of the things the courts kept saying was, and I heard this again last night on CNN, the purpose of the Bill of Rights is to protect the minority from the majority. CNN was doing this feature last night of the Brown family, polygamous family, and he says, look, I'm protected under the Bill of Rights for my polygamous lifestyle because the Bill of Rights exists to protect minorities like me from majorities like you. It does not. Bill of Rights exists to protect every individual's right from the aggression of government, period. Doesn't matter what race you are, what age you are, what gender you are. If you're an individual, you have God-given inalienable rights. It's not because of the group to which you belong. But we've now brought post-structuralism into everything that we do, from politics to education to the judiciary. That's post-structural. It's a bad deal. Now, the biblical antithesis of this, if you want to avoid it, and by the way, I love what Ronald Reagan said about the individual. He captured it. He said the Bible and its teachings help form the basis for the Founding Fathers' abiding belief in the inalienable rights of the individual, not the group. Rights which they found implicit in the Bible's teaching of the inherent worth and dignity of each individual. So you have a right as an individual to have your rights protected regardless of what anybody else thinks about them. That's why I can be a white guy and be in a double majority and still have the right to freedom of conscience. I can still have the right to private property. I can still have my home protected in the Third Amendment. I don't care whether I'm minority or majority. I'm an individual. You see, that's the biblical approach.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Often today, it seems that the federal government has become too intrusive into local matters, and federal micromanagement has now unfortunately become the norm in education, law enforcement, religious expressions, and even on what is and is not moral. Strikingly, the Founding Fathers had intended that the federal government never intrude into any of these issues. As Thomas Jefferson explained, taking from the states the moral rule of their citizens and subordinating it to the federal government would break up the foundations of the Union. I believe the states can best govern our home concerns and the federal government our foreign ones. According to Thomas Jefferson, the original plan was for the federal government to direct foreign affairs, but for the states and local communities to direct the domestic and the moral ones.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact Wall Builders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
The antithesis of post-structuralism, which emphasizes group and individual rights and divides rather than unites, is very simple. You have to look at the individual, not the group. You break things down. Jesus did not die for groups. He died for individuals. In the same way, individual salvation is there, not group salvation. That is just not the way it is. So you have to think individually, not group. Don't let group thinking get in, because that's a real dangerous trap, and that'll mess up the way you interpret the Constitution as well. Second thing that I'll point to as a trap is modernism. Modernism examines historical instances as if they had occurred today and historical persons as if they had lived today rather than the past. It separates history from its context and its setting. Simple example. Take the United Methodist Church today. That is considered to be a socially liberal church. On abortion, on marriage, on homosexuality, they take a socially liberal position. It is therefore easy for me to say that both George Whitefield and John Wesley were socially liberal, because they started the Methodist Church, and that's a church that accepts abortion and homosexuality. So Wesley and Whitefield both accepted homosexual marriage and both accepted abortion. That's modernism. I see that all the time in textbooks. The way it is now, well, these are the guys that started it. That must be what they believed. You know, Wesley and Whitefield, I don't know of hardly any Methodist church that would invite its own founders to speak in their pulpits today. I mean, the Methodist Church has changed that much in 200 years, but modernism does not allow for change over time. It makes everything static. Same thing when you look at Quakers. See, William Penn founded the Quakers. There's no way William Penn would be a Quaker today. What the Quakers believe is so opposite of what he taught 200 years ago. Same thing with Unitarians. Unitarians, you know what the Universalist Unitarian movement, well, several of the founding fathers were Unitarians. Oh, they must not have been Christians. No. 1784 is when Unitarianism got started. What it was in 1784 is not what it was in 1819, and it's sure not what it was in 1838. And founding fathers were dead by 1838, and that's when it started taking on the transcendental aspects. Prior to that, it was still considered a Christian denomination with a couple of aberrations. It got really weird after 1838. So if you're going to look at founding fathers that were Unitarians and say, well, I know what Unitarians are today. Oh, founding fathers must not have been Christians. No. That's modernism. Go back and find out what Unitarianism was at the time they were alive. It's apples and oranges. It's not the same animal in any way, shape, fashion, or form. And we often use modernism to really misinterpret history. We got to go back and see what it was like at the time. We do this particularly with the Constitution, because if you look at clauses we have in the Constitution, we regularly interpret these things on the basis of the way that we're familiar with our habits today and our knowledge and our experience. Great example of modernism is when you take something. And again, we're told it's the godless Constitution. But take the Sunday's Accepted Clause. You know, Sunday's Accepted Clause doesn't mean a whole lot because Sunday's not a big deal anymore. It was a big deal back then. And by the way, here's what courts used to say about the Sunday's Accepted Clause, and they cited that as one of the reasons to show that the Constitution was Christian, not godless. Here's one of the court decisions, 1846. The court said this. Court said, Christianity is a part of the common law of the land, with liberty of conscience to all. It has always been so recognized. The U.S. Constitution allows it as part of the common law. The President is allowed 10 days to sign a bill with the exception of Sunday. He says, the observance of Sunday is one of the uses of the common law recognized by our U.S. and state governments. Christianity is part and parcel of the common law. They said, look, the fact that we got a Sunday's Exception Clause proves it's a Christian document. Now today, Sunday's accepted. Sunday's just like any other day. I mean, we can go to work on Sunday. We can buy anything we want to on Sunday. Some of you may remember blue laws, but most people don't. And so since Sunday's not a special day today, it certainly wasn't 200 years ago. Certainly back then, we used that as proof that the Constitution was Christian. One more thing I'll show you here real quick before the break. See what they say, Christianity is part and parcel of the common law? That ought to send up another flag real quick, because if you remember, it's the Seventh Amendment that incorporates the common law into the Constitution. Now, if the court's saying Christianity is part and parcel of the common law, and if the common law is in the Constitution through the Seventh Amendment, then Christianity is in the Constitution. Not today, because you look at any common law definition today, it has nothing to do with Christianity. You look at any common law definition prior to 1950, it'll have a lot to do with Christianity. That's the difference in modernism. We take the definition today, we'll ignore 350 previous years because of the way we define it today, and we lose our heritage as a result. James Wilson